Hey, I want to see how many R1 presses are required to beat LittleBigPlanet 3 story mode. The way I'll be going about this is pretty simple. Just avoid pressing R1 at all costs. And if there's no way to do that, then I add an R1 press to the counter. So with all that being said, let's dive in to the challenge. Get it? Dive in? Cause it's LittleBigPlanet. The introduction starts with nothing interesting, and ends with nothing interesting. Needlepoint peaks shouldn't give us any trouble. Keyword shouldn't, it definitely does. First off, we have to climb up this net looking thing, and just so you know, if you hold R1 but jump off a ladder, it counts as one R1 press. Just so we're on the same page. From what I can tell, and I could be wrong, there is no way to get by this obstacle. But we can keep holding down R1 later on. We find 3 tiny sponges, stacked. The way you get past this one is by letting go of R1 either after or before pushing it over. At the next part, I tried really hard to get up there without pressing R1, but to no avail. It's unfortunately too high to get up to. Moving on, we get to a butter slide. And I attempted to use my momentum from that to get past the swinging sponges. It may be possible if you land on the right corner and jump, but for now, it's impossible. Next is the same obstacle, but with 2 swinging sponges. Ooh, scary. The minimum R1 press amount is what? Oh, never mind. We skipped grabbing them completely. And next after that is a sponge that swings you. There's no way to get by it. Dang, the devs really wanted the game paths to be mandatory. And that's the level. Newton's airship is a pretty short level, which makes for a great game, doesn't it? This level shows the introduction of our very first power-up, the Pumpinator. Our goal for this power-up is to ignore the blowing function completely, because we'd have to press R1 to do that, and that's no good. But if we have to, then we'll keep holding it as if it were a ladder. Right away, we're meant to blow a pinwheel clockwise to lower a platform, but if we hug the wall and suck the pinwheel, we can achieve the same clockwise goal. I tried to bring one of the blocks with me to avoid a later ladder, but it seems there's an invisible wall, so we'll have to climb the ladder. Very soon after, we need to let go of R1 and press L1. And then we have to press R1 to push in these batteries. And that's the end of the level. Instntrmn's beginning wants us to press R1 to push a wall up, but through a little bit of playing around, I learned that jumping while holding L1 and the Pumpinator downwards could get the wall up with no problem. Now, even though blowing this pinwheel counterclockwise is the only way to progress, it won't let us suck it that way. I don't like that. No matter how much we try. What the heck? Why was I speaking like I was in Dora? Once we get in the house, we're met with ladders. Why are there ladders in our old woman's home? And dangerous escalators? Seems extremely unfair to her. Like, if she leaves, it's probably gonna take her a while to get to her bedroom. Wait, where even are the rooms? This is supposed to be Nana Pud's home, right? Where's the kitchen? Or a bathroom? Who built this house? Anyway, we climb the ladders and keep holding R1 after that. We can get through a big portion of the level, but we get stopped by a cutscene. And we get sent to the bottom of this dungeon, which I'm not even going to question why she has. And then we climb all the way up, and that's it. Seriously, who built this house? From what I can tell, there is no way to get past the pinwheels without pressing R1, and there's a cutscene in the middle of the level. After the cutscene, I tried blowing the pinwheels with L1, and it didn't work for some reason. And then I saw something I've never seen before, these R1 signs. But beyond that, There's nothing more to this level. Manglewood Swamp. To get to High Stakes Heist, you have to grab a sponge. High Stakes Heist shows off our new power-up, the Blink Ball. I don't believe it will pose much of a threat, but we'll see how it goes. Right away we gotta use it, which is only great for traversal, not the challenge, because holding down R1 will shorten the range that the Blink Ball was able to go in. Later on, we meet a few dice we have to grab onto, which eventually makes us have to let go of R1. Additionally, when we're in the vents, I had to let go of R1 to make sure that the Blink Ball hit the Blink panel, then press it again right after. There are a few more notable things in this level, like how I pulled this lever, and how difficult this escape portion was. But after all that, the level is over. To get to Deep Space Drive-In, you need to climb down a ladder. Deep Space Drive-In is a level that takes place in space, meaning there should be fewer necessary R1 presses. Sure. The Pumpinator is used throughout the level, so we kind of get a free pass because we're swimming in space and we have to use the Pumpinator. 2 thumbs up. We only have to press R1 twice in the level, on the pull wheels. That's about it. To get to Shake, Rattle, and Roll, you have to climb up a ladder. Shake, Rattle, and Roll features the introduction of the Velociporters, which allows us to avoid some R1 presses, like this part, where we're supposed to grab the sponge on the fork, but we gain enough speed and jump off of it instead. I felt really cool after that one. There's a lever in the little hole that we switch with our body. Almost immediately after that, we have to climb up to get over this obstacle. Why can't we use the Pumpinator's suck abilities to pull down these levers? This level has a few parts where we're forced to press R1, but overall, it doesn't have that many. Crumbling Crypts and Lights Camera Traction are levels that both feature Oddsock as the playable character. Oddsock is the only character that doesn't need to press R1, so we finish these levels with 0 R1 presses. Ziggurat Grand Hall has only 1 R1 press because when we go to Flip Flop Folios, we have to grab a pulley. Flip Flop Folios. I couldn't find an image of Flip Flop Folios' level badge, so I am using a placeholder. You like it? Anyways, Flip Flop Folios is pretty interesting because in almost every part we're supposed to press R1. We can't avoid it. How troublesome. I spent a while trying to get enough height to jump onto the weight, but I just couldn't. But there are also impenetrable firewalls, so there's basically no avoiding the terrors of this level. And not only that, but this level also prevents us from holding R1 most of the time because it has you grab sponges to progress. And yet, this level only makes us press R1 6 times. Very slow as hot coals. Yep. Go Loco introduces us to the Creatinator's distant cousin, the Hook Hat, and it's used basically the same as the ladders, so that's pretty fun. There's a cutscene shortly after we get it, then after that I have to let go to land on a layer launcher, and then again later to land on a bounce pad, and that's all. I'm gonna be honest, this level is really boring. Mostly because Toggle is just a Sackboy clone with a lame power and lame side effects. All of the R1 presses have to do with grabbing though, obviously. On the Link of Disaster. This level is an auto-scroller, so you can straight up avoid any parts where there's a grab by dying. Buncombe Lagoon. You just have to walk to Belly of the Beast. Belly of the Beast is interesting because there's a lot of sponges you can skip grabbing, and most of the R1 presses come from ladders. But of course, not all of them are avoidable. The sponges that aren't are related to a door or a weird cinematic segment. To get to Mask Maker's tower, all that's required is climbing some ladders. Mask Maker's tower is the worst level for this challenge because it features the boost boots. And the reason that's a problem is because we can't just keep pressing R1 to get by like we used to. We have to press it one by one individually, and it doesn't help because there are barely any skips. We are forced to press R1 every time we're meant to. Although, I think there is only one that makes it slightly more bearable, although not by much. And then there's just an angry face in the script. To get to Cloud Caravan, boost boots are required, ladder climbing is required, the 7 Chaos Emeralds in the GameCube 2 is required, the boost boots again. Despite how much this level tries its best to get us to press R1, we can actually make some maneuvers around that. The main reason this level wants us to press R1 is so that we can swoop. Although that's a faster way to move around, we never need to do it. Even at the part of the level where the walls close in really fast, they just match our speed. And at the part where we learn to grab and fly, we only need to get the sponges on our head and push them onto the weight thingy. It's similar to the Newton bombs part, although it took me much longer. But despite all of that, I can't get away from this level with 0 R1 presses. We have to throw a few plunges to proceed, but that's it. And both of the sections have only 1 R1 press each, which leaves us at 2 R1 presses. Skipping Odd Sock, the only times an R1 press is required is when we need to pull out the batteries as Toggle and Swoop. That's it. This is the final level in the story, and at the beginning we play as Toggle. The way we get past this is by grabbing the bombs that Swoop is carrying. There's no way to get around grabbing, and we have to do it 3 times to proceed to the next phase. The next phase is as Swoop. The Swoop portion plays almost exactly like it did in Cloud Caravan. So I don't think there's much to say. So after that, we play as Sackboy. Finally, the first little part has us use the hook hat, and at some point, we have to let go and immediately press R1 again. But after that, we need to grab a sponge to blow up a bomb. The final part is a mad dash as Odd Sock, which means that no matter what, we won't have to press R1 ever again. And that's the end of the story. So let's review. For the prologue, we had a total of 13 R1 presses, the most coming from Needlepoint Peaks, and the least coming from the introduction. For Manglewood, we had 14 R1 presses, the most coming from Shake, Rattle, and Roll, and the least coming from Crumbling Crypts and Lights, Camera, Traction. For the Ziggurat, we had 15 R1 presses. Are you starting to see a pattern here? The most coming from Flip Flop Folios, and the least coming from Furry Souls, Hot Coals, and On the Link of Disaster. For Bunkum Lagoon, we had 72 R1 presses. So much for that pattern. The most coming from Mask Maker's Tower, and the least coming from Cloud Caravan and The Great Escape. All of that for a total of 114 R1 presses. That was way more than I expected, though this challenge was really fun. If you liked this, then comment some other challenges that I could do. Also, if you were wondering, I said R1 56 times in this video.